Hello, and thank you for joining us for our webcast today, Guide to Applying for the World's Most Ethical Companies Process for 2021. Before I hand the mic over to, there's just a few housekeeping items I'd like to address. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them via the Q&A function you see on your screen. If we don't get to your questions, we will certainly follow up after the webcast. Additionally, today's presentation and recording will be sent by the end of this week on Friday, along with those links, the custom links to apply for the 2021 designation. Doug, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Clea. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in today's webcast on how to apply for the 2021 World's Most Ethical Companies Process. Very excited you all can join us today, and looking forward to going into much more detail into this year's application, some background information for those of you who might be new to the process, and what the next steps will be. So again, thank you so much for joining today. We're all really excited to speak with you all today. And speaking of who's on the line, I'm joined by my colleagues, Michael Byrne, Senior Vice President, and Neil Thurston, Director of Data and Services from Ethisphere. The three of us are among the team who was involved in the World's Most Ethical Companies process. So again, we're here to present the process for 2021, answer your questions, as well as give you some more insight as to what's to come. As Clea did mention, and Clea, thank you for the introduction, we welcome your questions throughout today's discussion, so please submit to the chat function any questions you have about the process, if we can clarify anything during today's conversation. And of course, for those of you joining on the recording of this conversation, we welcome your input over email as well, which we'll be able to share towards the end of today's conversation. So again, welcome to all. And a little bit more detail on what we plan on covering today as we launch the 2021 program. We want to first touch on, albeit very briefly, who we are as an organization and the program itself, World's Most Ethical Companies program as well. We realize many of you on the line today are brand new to Ethisphere, are brand new to the World's Most Ethical Companies process. We want to take just a few moments to provide some context for you specifically. From there, we'll talk briefly on why you should apply, some of the benefits, both explicitly and implicit, that are available to those who go through the process, and share with you some of the feedback we receive from folks who have gone through this process many times before and the value they receive from it. Of course, we'll go into detail in terms of what's within an application, what we look at as part of our evaluation, and the methodology and weighting that we do apply. And of course, for those on the line today who are familiar with who we are in the process, something you are undoubtedly very interested in are the changes we've made to the 2021 application year as well. So we'll be touching on that as we get farther down in today's discussion. As well, we'll be sharing some experiences that we've seen as the review team on some common pitfalls and applications that we've come across, as well as provide some very clear instruction on how you all can get started with the 2021 process, as well as share some important dates as well. So that's what we'll be covering, as well as much, much more in today's conversation as part of this launch process. Now, what you may be asking is, who is this conversation for? And really, it's for everyone, right? We've designed today's webcast, as well as many of our resources, to be relevant and applicable for everyone on the line, specifically those who are veterans to our process, who have been through the application many times before, who have been multi-year honorees. We have many different resources specifically for you, as well as those who are rookies, or even those who are just curious about the program and who we are as an organization. We'll touch on some aspects of us as a company and as a program that hopefully should get you up to speed quickly and help you decide if this is perhaps a program that is appropriate for you for 2021. And so, starting with the curious and the rookie groups, how we have highlighted here, we want to take just a brief moment to set the stage on who Ethisphere is. For those of you on the line, and I can see there are many who may not be familiar with who we are as an institution. So Ethisphere, we began in 2006 as really an organization that was founded to define what's good when it comes to corporate integrity. Now, at the time, there were many ways to define what's bad in business ethics: fines, debarments, the alphabet soup of DPAs, NPAs, CIAs, but there really wasn't an objective measure in terms of doing business the right way. And so Ethisphere was formed at that time to really fill that role. And the way we do it is through a variety of different mechanisms, by both defining what's good and then measuring those aspects. So we look at the global array of companies and look to define what amongst these organizations is good with respect to doing business with integrity. And then we take our energy and efforts to measure those efforts and then share with the broader community as well, through both curating and convening insights, as well as through convening our Business Ethics Leadership Alliance and other membership groups to bring in different facets of these organizations together. So it's our perspective that the most clear articulation of the tenets of Ethisphere is really exemplified by the World's Most Ethical Companies program and the process underlying it. And so for those of you who are curious as to what this program is, it started in 2007. So this will be the 15th year we've been managing and hosting this process. It really is a celebration in recognition of the companies that are doing business with integrity, who are exemplifying leadership, and who are really setting the standard with respect to ethics. And so we pride ourselves in developing and managing and really hosting this recognition. And secondly, it's significantly designed to be both a measurement and benchmarking effort. Ethisphere prides itself on really being a rising tides type of organization, right? We look to share and convene companies comprising our WME community and sharing through measurement and benchmarking the best practices we've observed, because again, we believe this is a cause for celebration. And again, we are a rising tide organization. And so we take this measurement and benchmarking effort and really use our attention and trust to develop and vet the data we receive to, again, isolate and communicate trusted insights coming out of this data. So it's, again, a long storied process. It's one we're really proud of, and we've had a chance to work with some phenomenal organizations over the years as part of this process. Now, one other common question: why does this need to exist, right? Why is this important? Why do you do it? And we believe that the correlation between doing business with integrity and performance is closely connected. We believe those who are setting the standard are also differentiating themselves from a competitive standpoint by being more attractive to investors, by being more attractive to potential talent, by retaining talent longer, by securing more favorable terms and contracts. This is, we believe, doing business with integrity is a competitive differentiator, and it's something we've tracked and have measured over time as well. So again, something we're very proud of and really excited to, again, take this with us into this most current application year as we introduce it to you all today. So with that, Neil, I'm hoping you can elaborate for the folks on the line today a little bit about the benefits of applying, specifically for those who may be interested as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Doug. You know, there are a number of very, very tangible benefits, whether or not you're a public company or a private company or, you know, any sort of organization. If you take the time to fill out the EQ survey, there are a lot of benefits here that we can really tease out from applying for this. The survey itself provides a structure under which, you know, you can review and understand elements of your programs throughout your organization. We have a ton of questions which are targeted to look at different facets of the way that you've set up your organization and your program, and that really give your team an element of self-evaluation. You can actually learn a lot about the way that your organization works simply by reading the questions, as well as by trying to find the answers to the questions, working to find those answers within various different functions, such as the legal, the operations area, senior leadership. The EQ survey provides an excellent opportunity to look at these practices that we're asking about, to talk with those different areas of the company and start to understand, how does this all fit together? How does this work as a whole? And how is our company truly acting ethically? You know, how are we working with this? Some of the additional benefits that come outside of that EQ process are also, you know, Ethisphere has a lot of things that follow on from this. After filling out the EQ and going through the WME process, we provide a scorecard to compare what you've provided us with, your programs, to those who are included on the WME honoree list. You get a comparison in a section by section format. We also provide, based on the data we get from this EQ process, a series of insights, reports, webcasts. We take this data and make it very valuable and useful for you and others within your organization. We give lots of notices throughout the year. We do a lot of analysis and working on this data. It's fascinating stuff to get back. And last but not least, BELA members get focused facts reports, as well as some benchmarking services. These are some very focused areas and data points and items that you can use to help improve the way you think about your program and put your program into place. The benchmarking is a fascinating process where we take roughly 25 to 30 different responses from areas within the EQ that your organization has filled out and look at those responses in a critical way against how honorees answered those particular questions. So a fascinating opportunity to really dig in and see where there may be gaps or just simply areas of improvement for a program. And the next slide. So probably the next question on your mind, what are we evaluating and how are we giving different weights to all of these areas? Well, we look at the performance using these hundreds of inputs, not only through the EQ, but also through the supplemental documentation. And we organize all of this after our review team has taken the time to really comb through all the material that you've given us, as well as through your EQ responses. And we've put them into 5 weighted categories. The first and probably most important, I suppose you could say, is the ethics and compliance program. This is our core focus. This is where you're getting a ton of data from, and we do weight it at about 35%. And you're looking at the organization, the structure, and all that. And we'll explain that a little bit more in the following slides. We also have the culture of ethics section. This is the areas around how you're looking at your culture and how you're addressing issues or positive things throughout your culture. We weight that at about 20%. We also have a section called environmental and social impact. This area has changed slightly for 2021, and we'll go into a little bit more detail about this. But it's essentially corporate social responsibility and environmental aspects and how your organization interacts with society, employees, all of those sort of critical areas. We weigh that at about 20. We also look at your corporate governance, how the board deals with issues, how the structure is set up. We weigh that at 15%. And of course, last but not least, how you present your organization's leadership and how your organization's reputation in the media and in the public eye looks. And we weigh that at about 10%. So I think our next section here, we have, what have we got, Doug?
Yeah, it's on how companies are evaluated. And I believe, Michael, you'll be elaborating on this section briefly. We did receive a question. I'm hoping, Michael, you can weave into your discussion on evaluation. And that is how we differentiate between public and private companies as well. So with that, Mike, I'll just turn over to you for.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. We actually have received a couple questions that I will cover on this slide as we go through. So how are companies evaluated? More specifically, how are they evaluated? The backbone of our evaluation is we have our ethics quotient survey or questionnaire. It's approximately 220 questions in various areas, which we will get into. And that provides us an objective way to evaluate a company's program. And so there's a self-reported, so it's basically mainly a multiple choice questionnaire where you will get a score based on how you answer that survey. That is the objective portion of our evaluation. We don't think that we can stop there, though, with how somebody responds to a multiple choice questionnaire. So then we request documentation, and we review the documentation qualitatively. So the questionnaire is objective, and the documentation is a qualitative evaluation. It's subjective. We're looking at, in the questionnaire, you tell us you're doing something, and in the documentation, we are evaluating how well you are doing something. We very intentionally, and I'm going to touch on this in terms of how this changes this year, but we very intentionally ask for certain types of documentation that we can extrapolate out more about your program than just that documentation is showing us. For example, we will ask if you have a training plan. We are asking for that training plan, and we will ask that in the multiple choice questionnaire, but then we will also ask for an the training plan. So you will get credit for if you have it and how you answer the multiple choice questionnaire regarding the training plan, but then we will also look at the training plan. And what we're looking at is we're looking at it to see if we can understand how strategic and well thought out your training program is, because we think that we can glean that from how organized and well thought out your plan is. And I'll get into the documentation more in a subsequent slide. We also do independent media research and public filings research. So as Neil mentioned, one of the categories we look at is reputation. And what we are looking for is we're independently evaluating public sources, public filings. We use the Dow Jones Factiva database to look at if there's anything out there in the world that would adversely impact a company's reputation. And if there's something that's significant enough, we will discuss it with the company, but that alone could potentially preclude a company from being on the list. And then finally, we bring all of that together and we arrive at a final ethics quotient score. And this is where I will address the questions that have come up so far, at least the ones that I've seen. So we evaluate that ethics quotient score in the context of similar types of companies. So this generally breaks down by your risk profile and your resources and the type of company you are. So it's your industry, your size, your location. We are looking to see your results in context. We would not expect a retail company to perform as well within our evaluation process as an insurance company. An insurance company is just going to have generally is going to have more risk and a stronger ethics and compliance program. So the first question that we received was, do we review public and private companies differently? The answer is yes. We would compare private companies to private companies for areas that we would think might be different, like governance. We're evaluating your governance. We would expect to see different governance for private companies compared to public companies. That said, if you are in a certain industry, we would compare you to companies in that industry for your ethics and compliance program. But we would definitely consider that you are a private company. We also received a question that's pretty specific. Are state-owned companies eligible to apply? Generally speaking, the answer to that question is no. We have found that the governance structure and what we're looking for in a company's, attributes of a program and who a company is, generally state-owned companies, we really can't compare them to the other applicants. I would suggest though, and this is going to be a theme when I get to subsequent slides, reach out to us and ask specifically. We're happy to have a much more specific conversation about that because it's a general high-level question. So the general answer is state-owned companies generally cannot apply or are not eligible, but we're happy to discuss that in more detail. And Doug, if you could forward to the next slide, please.
Of course.
So what is contained in this ethics quotient survey? It's going to have an introduction. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. The corporate governance is where we get to this substantive portion. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because you'll see this when you get the questionnaire. But we have sections for corporate governance. We have a ethics and compliance program section with the subsections that are off to the right there, 4A through 4G. And then we have a third-party management section. The important part of this slide for companies that have participated in the past is we have changed how we are referring to what we used to call corporate social responsibility or CSR. We are now referring to that as environmental and social impact. And we will address this when we talk about changes. But so the section of the survey is impact assessment and reporting. And then we have the leadership and reputation section. And Doug, why don't we forward to the next slide? I think that's what a lot of people are listening for, which is, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I skipped myself. So that's what's on the ethics quotient survey. The next slide is, what is the documentation that we are requesting? And I've been maybe overly teasing the changes that we've made this year, which is the next slide. But we ask for, as I discussed earlier, supplemental documentation. We really are focused on this documentation being the subjects that we can do a qualitative evaluation of. We are not asking for this documentation so you can somehow prove to us that you are doing what you said you were doing in the questionnaire. We are asking for documentation and that we can do a qualitative, subjective review of. This year, we will be really limiting what documentation we're asking for. We are going to be focusing really on quality and what we really need to see over quantity. So not every section is going to need documentation. The documentation this year, and again, this is going to be in the what's new this year, but we will be using Box, which we used last year, to upload documentation. We have streamlined and improved the process for that. And then we also, in the documentation, we have a document that I would refer you to that will be available when this all launches on Friday, it's guidelines about the documentation. And it's going to be a lot more detailed this year. Please review that because it is changing this year from previous years. And we're trying to be very explicit and specific. So please follow the guidelines closely. Those guidelines are going to tell you how to submit documents, how to organize documents, and it's going to be a lot more specific about the recommended documents to submit. It's also going to highlight in bold at the bottom of this slide, please ask questions. That if there's a theme to this conversation, it is that we've always made ourselves available to answer questions. We're really doubling down on that this year. If you have questions, given where everybody is in the world and given what we're all dealing with, please reach out with questions. Doug, can you forward to the slide that I've been waiting for, obviously, since I keep interrupting myself to get to. So what's changed for 2021? So we talked with numerous companies that have participated in this process before. And almost universally, we're told how valuable the process is, and then we are told how much work it is. And so as we talked through this, and as everybody is in the unique circumstances that we find ourselves in, we really started looking at how can we lessen the burden? How can we still get the information we need to get to understand a company and properly evaluate a company, but to reduce the burden? And so I'm going to start over here on the right in the documentation requirements. We are going to be asking for less documents this year. We have gone through and streamlined not streamlined, we've just reduced the subject areas that we're going to ask for support. We've also focused what we're asking for. Our documentation guidelines are going to be very focused. They're going to ask, if you have this document, please provide it. We also are working on our process. That also became very clear to us that if we're trying to reduce the burden, we can make it easier to apply while still getting the information that we're looking for. So we will have folders on Box that will be labeled for each type of document that we're asking for. So we're going to set it up for you, and then you just upload into it. And again, I will stress, please ask questions. If you run into any difficulties, we are all in our basements or our bedrooms or wherever we're working from. We are happy to address them. Finally, and this is a teaser for something that we'll be introducing in October, but we're creating a dashboard. We are going to create a dashboard, a portal that will simplify your experience. It's going to display certain aspects of where you are in the submission process. It will tell you if we've received documents for certain areas or subjects. So we've really worked on reducing the burden through asking for less documents, focusing and clearly asking for the documents that we want. And for those of you that have been participating in this process for numerous years, we've struggled with that because we don't know what we don't know. And so we've always said, well, we want this, but if there's anything else, please include it. And this year we really are trying to put parameters around it for the participants to lessen the burden. Now, moving over to the ethics quotient questionnaire. So we've also updated our questionnaire. We have clarified questions and responses. We have removed question formats that we heard loud and clear from companies. It was really burdensome to answer. I know you're all on mute, but I can hear the cheering now. The table format questions are gone. Yeah, I can see Neil nodding. That was pretty uniform. Those are really hard to answer. We deleted some questions that we weighed the burden of answering them versus the value that we got out of the information. We clarified other questions, and then we added new questions. We added questions based on, we have a methodology committee that we rely on heavily of outside experts outside of Ethisphere that helps with the update. We also have numerous conversations with companies that participated last year in our benchmarkings. We have internal Ethisphere expertise that we rely on, and then we also base them off of the Department of Justice, the recent Department of Justice guidelines. I want to flag when we're talking about the process changes that we've made, The other thing that we heard loud and clear is we need to do a better job showing people how our questionnaire has changed. Again, another example where we can make it easier without really changing the information we're gathering and our ability to evaluate. So you're going to get much, much more specific guidance on what questions have been removed, what questions have changed, what questions are new. And I think that'll make it a lot easier for companies. We also, as we teased out earlier, we have a new impact reporting and assessment section. This is really the only part of the questionnaire that even what people call corporate social responsibility and how they define it, it's a field that's evolving so quickly that we really rewrote it, much of the section. So that's the section that you're going to see the most change in. And we're really excited about how we have, what we've done to update it. And finally, we can't ignore that we're experiencing a pandemic. And we have offered the opportunity at the end of each section to share with us how your program has changed, what challenges you've dealt with. So we have the questionnaire generally, it's going to ask you generally what is your program, and then it's going to give you the opportunity to explain to us what you've done to react to the pandemic. And then finally, it's not on this slide, but we should have put it on every slide, and especially for what's changed, please reach out to us with questions. I don't know how I can stress that enough. We talked to a lot of companies that participated last year, and companies are in very different situations dealing with different challenges right now. And there's just no way that our process can properly understand and meet every participant exactly where they are right now. And so the best we can do is to say, please reach out with questions. If you have a unique circumstance, we'd like to discuss it with you. And we don't want you spinning your wheels trying to figure something out. Just reach out to us.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. That's great. One other addition to the EQ questionnaire for 2021 that isn't listed here, but we have made additions to the questionnaire that focus on diversity and inclusion this year, as well as general themes on employee and stakeholder mental health as well. So you can expect to see some new coverage on those areas as you review the 2021 questionnaire. Now, Michael and Neil, we received a variety of questions in the last few minutes, and I'll pose a few of them to you both here. First, Michael, I'll turn to you for this first question. We received a comment about whether or not the materials are treated confidentiality, the confidentiality behind what's submitted. Can you perhaps elaborate a little bit on how we approach that? And
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for whoever asked that. It's almost like we planted you in the audience. We treat it confidentially. There are two types of information that we're gathering. We're gathering the responses to the questionnaire, and then we're also gathering documentation separately, as I just discussed. But let me touch on each. We treat both confidentially. We will never share who has participated in the process unless you are publicly named to the world's most ethical companies list. So first of all, whether you've participated or not is confidential. Secondly, we will not share any of this information. We do use the responses, and we try to be very clear about this. We use the responses to the questionnaire as aggregated data with responses of other companies so that we can provide the benchmarking that we're talking about. But we do it in a way where it can't be tied back to any individual company. And then we destroy any of the documentation that's been submitted to us within a year of it being submitted. And if it's a real concern, we could destroy it sooner. Again, that reach out to us with any specific concerns. If there's any documentation that you feel like you need to redact, I would again reach out to us and talk it through with us so that we can help you be comfortable with what we're asking for, while at the same time we get what we need to get.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. That's great. We received a few other questions on documentation. One of which was for those organizations where Box isn't a compliant resource to use, reach out to us. We have some flexibility in figuring out ways in which we can interact and getting the materials from you. Let us know. We have some flexibility again to work with you in that submission process. We understand every IT system is different. So again, we built in some flexibility to accommodate those situations in which it's not allowed to be used. Great. Looking at other questions, I know we received one earlier on in the presentation regarding how Ethisphere classifies sectors or industries as part of the questionnaire itself, and what to do if your organization doesn't quite fit how we've defined the structure underlying the demographic section. And I'm happy to report we've expanded that section for this year to make it somewhat more nuanced in how we approach the classification of industries. But the main theme here is, as Michael pointed out before, is reach out to us if there's confusion on that specific section or any section of the questionnaire as you go through it. So look to the new survey or the updated survey to see if the new classifications work for your organization. And if not, we'll coordinate with you on next steps as well.
There are a lot of questions.
Several questions.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. Michael or Neil, we did receive one asking for some more specificity regarding our new COVID-19 pandemic challenge related questions and how that impacts our evaluation. What would you elaborate on there with respect to how it impacts?
Neil, do you want to take that, or would you like me to?
Sure. I mean, and absolutely correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. But we've put in a few extra questions around the COVID-19 specific items and how your organization is dealing with the pandemic. You know, the changes that may have happened. Anything you wish to explain to us about how you're getting through this, how you're adapting your procedures. I believe that these are, of course, optional responses for you. We are not subjecting this to grading. If you choose not to fill those out, that's absolutely fine. We did want to give you all an opportunity to explain to us why you're in the situation you're in, or not, or what may have changed from your plans that you had set out in 2019 and put in all of the caution and care and due process that we know you do to make your program shine. Any other elements? I know we typically keep these very open and free forms so that you can give us a narrative to explain it. We know these things don't fit very well into a check the box kind of situation. This whole pandemic does not fit well into a check the box kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
We did want to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, Neil, I think you're spot on. I will, I guess, expand a little bit just to plainly say, we're asking the questions to allow you to provide us with the information that you would like to provide us with. There's not a score on that specific question. It's not going to be worth 20 points. That said, when the team is going through and evaluating a submission, it's really good to be able to understand the company and to understand what the company is going through. And so we do have the ability to go look at other questions and score. And so that narrative, it's really providing you the opportunity to tell us what you need, what you think we need to know. We tried to have multiple choice questions, and we do have a couple of multiple choice questions relating to practices under COVID. So it's really our attempt to have flexibility in a situation that I think Neil said really eloquently. It just doesn't lend itself to a check the box multiple choice question. And so we're doing our best to try to meet you where you're at and understand what's going on in your life.
Yeah, and I think one reason that we've introduced these questions to Michael and Neil for 2021 is for many of the conversations we have with companies who have engaged in this process in years past, we've heard time and time again, they want to know what other companies are doing given this pandemic, what other challenges are being shared, what practices are being put in place given this new environment. So we really hope to be able to take that information, glean relevant insights, and share with the community as well. So it's really our way of, hopefully communicating with you all as our community, what some other leading companies are doing in this space too. So more to come there, but yeah.
Doug, there are a couple other questions. Well, there are a few, but let me just, some that I think are appropriate at this juncture. Does the documentation have to be public? No, we in fact, most of the documentation we get is not public information, but we do. And we're also, I should have said this before, we are happy to sign a non-disclosure agreement. We have a form non-disclosure agreement. I will tell you, we treat the documents the same, whether the non-disclosure agreement is going to be the same as our terms and conditions. So we are happy to sign that for companies that feel they need that assurance, but we're going to treat the documentation equally, no matter whether we've signed a non-disclosure agreement or not. We're very we keep it confidential. Will the quantity of documents be reduced? Yes. We really have gone through and thought about which documents we think most help us evaluate the program, and we will be asking for less documents this year.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing I kind of want to point out, I know there was a question earlier about companies wondering if they had to resubmit the same documentation. I understand that from a standpoint of not wanting to duplicate your efforts. You know, you've picked out those documents from prior session, and you know, you don't want to go through and find it all again. Given our reduction in the number of document requests we're going to have, given our focus, you know, we do ask that you submit new materials, but I think you'll find this process would be much easier for all involved to be able to pick out, based on these documentation guidelines, the documents that best show the quality of the program. Just finding those fewer examples that really meet what we're asking for from our documentation.
Well, Neil, that's consistent with, we destroy the documents.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't have when we go to evaluate this year, we don't have last year's.
Absolutely.
So really each year we look at it as a new, it's a new submission, really. And so we're looking at it, and it's probably different people looking, like it's not a year-over-year analysis for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We had another question. This is very specific. I'll just handle it really quickly. What if your organization doesn't fit into one of the multiple choice categories that we have? I would do your best to pick the closest one and explain it to us.
Right. And this goes back to this new expanded demographic question set as well. Michael, yeah. Another question we received early on was, can this criteria that we use also be applied to higher education institutions? And the short answer is yes. The questionnaire itself was developed to be applicable to organizations of essentially all shapes and sizes, with limited exception. But this really is meant to be broadly applied to organizations, large and small, regardless of where they're domiciled, public, private, and so on. So we intentionally designed this process to be welcoming to most different organization types as well. Another question, and Neil, I might pose this one to you, put you on the spot, is we received a question on specifically, do you measure the training plan based on years it's been in place? And I think the takeaway here is, how far back do we look when doing our review, right? What's the scope? What's the timeline in terms of what we're looking at with respect to our evaluation broadly?
Yeah.
So,
no, typically we're not looking for somebody to be we've been doing this for 20 years sort of a thing. It's more, we're looking at your practice of, are you doing, a training plan? Even if it's your first time putting together a training plan, what we're looking for is that effort and the thought you're putting into that effort. There are companies that have been doing this sort of a thing for a long time. There are companies who are just starting out. We definitely want to see both kinds. We want to see where your efforts are and where your thoughts and your heads are and the program is. And so, yeah, having had one for many, many years isn't necessarily going to give you an advantage over anybody else for that.
Great. Very good, thank you, Neil. And I will also touch on, we received a few different questions on the survey experience for 2021. I am very happy to report that we're building a new navigation tools to allow you to more easily navigate across the survey in a much more efficient fashion. So look for some new navigation tools when links are provided later this week. So more to come on that once we get closer to launch. Very good. With that, I can jump to the next slide unless Michael or Neil, are there any other questions to take at this particular point in time?
Well, there are a lot of questions. But we can also jump to, why don't we keep going and then we can come back at the end and answer the question.
Yeah, and this is just a quick summary of, for those interested, how do you apply, right? So there's really all applicants are required to follow 3 steps. The first, which is certainly evident by now, is the completion of that questionnaire, the Ethics Quotient questionnaire. So we'll be sending to you all unique access links to the survey, as well as copies of the survey, both in Word and PDF formats, for you to review in preparing for your answer submissions for that survey. So we ask that this questionnaire is completed as the first step. In parallel with that, as Michael had mentioned, we do ask that you gather and support the requested documentation as well. And so steps 1 and 2, really the primary steps of the application process, can be done in any order, in parallel or in step. And then in addition to these two steps, we also have the submission of the application fee. So the application fee, which we will touch on in a few more slides from now, has remained the same, is the same for 2021. 3,000 US is the application fee, which covers, again, namely our administration costs associated with making the application work. So that's the three main steps. The application materials are all due on or before Friday, November 13th, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we ask that, again, these three items are all addressed before that November 13th deadline. But again, as an organization, you could submit these in any order that's easiest for you, as long as all three are completed before that November deadline.
Right. Let's see. So I think we have, I'm ready. What should I do first? And is that Mike or is that me?
I think, Neil, that would be you.
All
You
right.
want to quickly cover these?
So if you're ready, you've been through all of our material, you've looked it over, you've talked with all the responsible people within your organization, you said, yep, we want to apply. What's the thing you should do first? Well, first thing is probably to look at whether or not your organization is actually eligible for it. We do welcome all sorts of companies throughout the entire world to apply. Whether you're public, whether you're private, whether you're for-profit, whether you're not for-profit, and we really do want to make sure we have a list that truly reflects some of the world's most ethical companies. However, we do have a few exceptions, and it's simply because these types of organizations don't tend to fit well within our process, or it's incredibly hard for us to review and get a sampling of how these organizations would work and do it in a comparative fashion, the way that the world's most ethical process works. These organizations tend to be not-for-profit colleges and universities, governments themselves. For example, we won't review the government of France. To that extent, also governmental agencies, a Department of Education or Health, that kind of a thing. Government majority-owned companies. We addressed this a little bit earlier. Typically, as Mike mentioned, we find the ownership structure and the internal governance structure to differ so significantly, even from not-for-profit organizations, that it is just incredibly difficult for our reviewers to look at them and objectively compare and put it through our process in a meaningful way that gets us information and gets you information. This similarly works with non-governmental organizations or NGOs. Again, it simply isn't a great fit with our organization, and we feel there isn't as much benefit for you as an NGO or a government majority-owned company to go through this process and to really get what we're putting out there with our process, and for us to understand your organizations as well. The second step is to start to review the application materials. Again, it's looking through, if you're a previous honoree, looking at your, if you have an application, it's kind of already been sent in automatically. If you're viewing this live, we will send you a link to the form to register, and that will be sent in a follow-up email, which you should expect that somewhat shortly after all of this. If you're listening to this on a recording, you can go to www.worldsmostethicalcompanies.com, and there we'll be able to provide you with all the materials. You can get a copy of the EQ, a copy of our materials. Again, we'll have a lot of this ready by Friday or shortly thereafter. Just the ability will be there for you. Even if you are viewing this live, we still have the website at www.worldsmostethicalcompanies.com set up for you to be able to see these materials. Third, but certainly not least, review the FAQs. We have a worldsmostethicalcompanies.com/FAQs subsite. We review and update these FAQs on a regular basis. If you find something as you're discussing it internally, whether or not to apply, that you have a question, feel free to email us at wmeapplications@ethisphere.com. We will certainly check internally. Some of these things often do become FAQs for this group in this process, and we welcome your feedback. We want to know what's on your minds. Go ahead to the next one. And yeah, Doug, Neil, maybe this is one you can speak to a little bit better than I can.
Oh, of course. And I should emphasize too, for everyone on the line, that this is requesting information. There's a no obligation request from us. So if you're even remotely interested, just ask, fill out the form on the website Neil just described. You'll receive all the materials when they're ready this week. Review them. You're under no obligation to go through the process. So we highly recommend just submitting the information for your request and materials, and we'll provide them to you as well. So please keep that in mind. Okay, so some common application pitfalls the team has seen over the last several years. First and foremost, we recommend starting early. As I believe, Michael, you had mentioned earlier, this is it's a process that is valuable, but it takes resources to complete, right? We've made some deliberate decisions this year, given the global environment, to provide more focus and reduce friction from the applicant's perspective that we hope you all notice and appreciate as you go through this year. But nonetheless, we highly recommend starting as early as you can to get a leg up on the process and making sure that everything is done correctly. The survey itself, the ethics quotient survey, we had mentioned it's lengthy. It covers a variety of topics. Many different sections may require input across the organization to get the answers you need. We provide you the access. We provide you the survey in both PDF and Microsoft Word format to allow you to easily share across departments. So we highly recommend reviewing the survey in its offline version formats first. Gather your responses, contemplate your answers before submitting them online. I think you'll have a much better experience in doing so than jumping right into the online survey itself. FAQs, as Neil had mentioned, are a great resource throughout. They'll be highlighted both on our website, and also we'll have an application guide for you all to receive that highlights these FAQs in more detail as well. So take a look at that when it arrives in your inbox, again, later this week. In terms of managing the process, it's been our experience that those organizations that designate a single project owner tend to have more success, and that you can coordinate easily. There's one point person internally at your organizations, instead of having multiple people interact with the survey online or having to gather documents as well. So we suggest focusing that on perhaps one project lead within your own organizations as you approach 2021. In easing, for those of you who have been through the process before, a great resource we have available to you is your previous results. So we can provide all of you who applied in previous years a copy of your results from previous years, so you get a sense of what was answered in last year's survey submission, to give you a sense of how you can prepare for 2021. So those will be coming for all those who did apply in previous years. We'll be sure to work with you all in getting you a copy of those results. And again, as Michael had pointed out, we don't retain materials year over year. And therefore, as you submit and prepare your application for this year, set aside those materials on your own local storage for future use, right? For future reference. It's a great way to keep record of what was submitted, but also have a great repository of what your program's all about in one clean place. We've heard that feedback many times before. So make sure you take that extra step to preserve your materials once you do have a chance to submit. Anyone, Michael or Neil, from your experience, I know you've had a chance to speak with many organizations as well. Any other pitfalls you'd like to call out at this particular juncture for the panels?
No, I mean, I've seen some good questions come in while you've been talking.
Great.
So one of them that maybe we have not said it clearly enough, I'm glad it was asked. Let me find it. The question really gets at it. Some organizations do certain things traditionally, but this is a special year. How are we handling that, right? Let's say you have a really robust training program in 2000, and then COVID happened, and now you're scrambling and you're trying to figure out what to do. It's not uncommon. Your focus is now safety rather than something that was top of mind. So I want to try to say this really clearly. Most of the questions in the questionnaire specify, we are asking what your typical company practices are. And then at the end of the section, we are giving you the opportunity to tell us. So if you typically train your managers in a certain way, but this year it couldn't happen because of COVID. I mean, I talked to a company last week that was rolling out manager training they were very excited about, and then all of a sudden the managers weren't in the office anymore. And so we are asking for what is typical, and then we are asking you so that you are being honest with us and you feel like you can share, well, this is typical, but we didn't do it this year because of what's going on. And so hopefully that addresses that question. Mm-hmm. We have several questions about how long does it take to complete the process. I think it depends upon the company. It is a process that certainly requires resources. Neil talked about the benefits of participating. of the benefits that I've been told have to do with the burden of applying. It's actually having to work with other groups within the company to answer questions that you may not know the answers to. Sometimes people find they're doing things they don't realize. Sometimes they realize they thought HR was doing something that they're not. I will piggyback on Doug's advice to look at the burden, download the questionnaire, to look at it, go through it yourself. We don't really have a simple answer as to how long it will take. Another question, is there a set number of companies that are designated on the world's most ethical companies list? There is not. What we do is it is a comparative exercise, and we look for companies that really stand out compared to their peers. So while there's not a set number, it's certainly a comparative exercise.
Yeah, that's very true. It's a comparative exercise. Take a beat after reviewing the materials, especially in that PDF. Consider the conversations you're going to have internally. Just take it in a bit as an opportunity to look at your company, and don't stress out so much about, how am I going to reply to this? It really is an interesting exercise to take a step back. You do have a little bit of time to evaluate your program, to really have a conversation with people about assessment and where you stand and where you think you want to go. And this is a wonderful opportunity to do that with a copy of the EQ in front of you, and to look at the FAQs and to have conversations with us at WME Applications. It's an interesting process.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Neil. So I know we have a little bit more information on the cost to apply. Neil, I'll turn it over to you in just a moment for that. I just want to let everyone know we're down to, I think, our last 7-8 minutes for the presentation today. Please get your questions now if you can. Of course, as we've reiterated several times, we are available for questions via email after the fact to talk with you all individually. But of course, if you have any questions for today's presentation, please take the opportunity to get them in now. Neil, do you want to talk a little bit about the application fee and the process for that, as well as some important dates coming up as well?
Absolutely, absolutely. This year, as in years past, we are charging a simple $3,000 administrative fee. This fee goes toward all of the time and effort and work that our review team does in order to review the materials, to set up the survey, to interact with people. There's quite a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes here, and that's what that administrative fee covers. It's the only required fee to participate. It is the same fee no matter what kind of organization you are. And as we mentioned earlier, it is unchanged from 2019 and 2020 application years. We heard it fairly loud and clear from a number of organizations that this may be a tough time financially, and we wanted to make sure that this fee process was simple and not overly expensive, and so that it can cover all of the administrative burden that we take on in doing this and getting you the data and making sure that this is an interesting experience for you. We do have an optional logo licensing fees for those honorees who wish to use the 2021 World's Most Ethical Companies logo that I think we've interspersed it here amongst a couple of different slides. You'll be able to see that at the beginning of this presentation, and I think we have another copy at the end. But yeah, to be able to use that within brochures and emails, and we've seen it used throughout a number of different places. A lot of honorees like to use the logo as a wonderful sort of promotion and point of pride. Additionally, we do, as we mentioned earlier, have benchmarking services. Again, it's those 25 to 30 data points that we pull from your EQ responses. A lot of companies they honestly say it's one of their experiences, having gone through the rigor in the process of filling out the EQ, that they can get some additional feedback and some additional data that Ethisphere really digs into and can bring some true value to your program and from the responses that you've given us. And let's see what's on the next slide. The important dates, all important dates, definitely get this down, get this on your calendars. August 7th, this Friday, we open the WME competition for 2021. This is when the survey materials will become available. This is when our documentation will become available. There's a long gap in there before Friday, November 13th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when we need you to be able to have submitted the documentation, the survey responses online, This is where we record, that is in that online process, as well as the fee. If you're having difficulty with any of that, please, please, please reach out to us at wmeapplications@ethisphere.com. We will then take a break, but behind the scenes we'll be probably feverishly working right up until January 29th, when we will privately notify every applicant of their status, whether or not they have been selected as an honoree or not. There will be a short period until February 8th, when we will give the public announcement of the 2021 class of World's Most Ethical Company honorees. This is a cause for celebration. We look forward to this date every year for many, many, many reasons. This coming 2021, in April 7th and 8th, we're looking forward to having the Global Ethics Summit at the Grand Hyatt in New York City, New York. Hopefully that'll go off without a hitch, knock on wood. We will also have on April 8th the Gala Awards dinner there in New York City for the honorees, to take that special time to understand their honoree status and give some recognition to all of the good efforts they put forward, especially given these challenging times. The following day, on April 9th, we will begin giving out the Ethics Quotient Analytical Scorecards, and these are the sort of PDFs and packets of information, if you will, where we will be discussing a lot of the items that we find within the survey. We'll be looking at giving out the scores for your organization's submission, and the scores, the average scores for the honoree set. And you can go over that material, and that's always an interesting read afterwards. That same day, April 9th, we'll be opening up the benchmarking sessions, and that's available to all applicants. Fees may apply in certain situations, but it's, again, looking at that EQ material and giving you some additional feedback, as well as that data expertise that we have. And let's see, Doug, did we have any other questions?
Yeah, a few more questions have come in. And one other point too on these important dates. The ones denoted with an asterisk are approximate. The size and structure and makeup of the applicant pool for any given year can oftentimes affect when notification dates are established. So do keep in mind these dates. The due date is firm. However, the applicant notification date and public announcement data are subject to change as we arrive at our final applicant pool for the 2021 year. Mm-hmm. And one other great question from the group, Michael, I might throw this one your way, regarding the scope of review. It says, so with applications being due in November, are we looking for data from a January to November 2021 timeframe, or how else can we, or how do we define the scope and timing for which material should be submitted?
I mean, that is a really good question, and we have an answer. We've debated it internally. It was discussed thoroughly. It's really hard. We are all hopeful that what we're living through right now is temporary. And so the time period, normally what we would say is, what is your program doing at the time that you are submitting your responses? Now we are saying, what does your program typically do? You will see that we ask for documentation just for training. That training just needs to be part of what your typical program is. So we're not cutting a hard cutoff from January 1st until November of 2020. So we're asking, what typically do you do? There will be questions that ask specifically in the last 3 years, in the last 2 years, in the last year. So certain questions will be specific. I know that I'm going to be made fun of by my team after this, but please reach out with questions. It's just impossible for us to anticipate every scenario that a company has. And we tried to, we really tried to. And what we came up with was stress that people should reach out to us. I think the world we're living in right now begs flexibility. It begs transparency and conversation. And so please reach out to us with questions. There are a couple other questions. I think we're out of time. We will reach out to the people asking the questions. You will get answers to it. If your company has some kind of unique situation, if you are a subsidiary or a sister company, like you're not the holding company or the parent company level and you want to apply, please reach out to us and talk it through. We certainly do have that happen, but in order for us to get the information we're looking for, it is helpful for us to be able to talk that through with you, because the questionnaire may not fit you perfectly.
Mhm.
So, and we will be reaching out to people with questions we haven't been able to reach.
Very good. Thank you, Michael. I know we are just at the top of the hour. So again, as Michael had elaborated, for those of you who have reached out with questions, first of all, thank you. We will be responding to you offline from today's presentation, but thank you for the questions. Our email address that we've mentioned several times is here for you regarding contact information. Look for the official launch email this Friday containing your survey information, documentation guidelines, and all the resources necessary to begin the process for 2021. So we're very excited to be able to begin for 2021. We're excited to have you all on the line today. Please do reach out with questions at any point. And Neil and Michael, thank you for your time today. It's been a great conversation. And then, of course, behind the scenes to our team, Clea and Scarlett, thank you for your help in letting this webcast run very smoothly. So thank you for all your assistance. And again, for those of you on the line, we're excited to get started for 2021. And with that, I think we'll stop the presentation for today and look forward to working with you all over the next coming months.
Thank you.
To everybody.
Thanks, everyone.